Well, let's bring in our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, tell us about this camp. We've obviously heard about this, what seems to be a retaliation. We're yet to hear more details from the authorities in Israel, in Tel Aviv. But bring us up to date with, Jenin, why it's such a target.
Well, first of all, it's been in the headlines for years and years and decades, right? You know, the operation at the height of the Palestinian Intifada back in 2002, that was a raid by Israeli forces, also on the Jenin refugee camp. It has long been considered, it sounds cliched to say so, but a hotbed, a flashpoint, choose your noun there, for, depending on your perspective here, either Palestinian militant violence or a hotbed of terrorism, as the Israeli forces see it, that needs to be quashed, that needs to be rooted out, stamped out, because it poses an existential threat to Israel. So there have been two sharply divergent views of exactly what is going on in this camp. What we do know about it, the basic historical facts, is it came about, it's been around for decades, for over half a century. In the 1950s, it arose from, it was meant to accommodate, basically give shelter to, the Palestinians who were made homeless, who became essentially refugees after the creation of the State of Israel, and they since settled there, and their descendants, and generations later they're still there. The problem is, like a lot of refugee camps where you have thousands of people pouring in, few services often offered by the state, these people sort of are marginalized, left forgotten. It becomes a ghetto. You have high unemployment, you have soaring poverty, rampant poverty, you have disaffection, and it does become a breeding ground for, to put it mildly, disaffected groups. What you have right now in Jenin is, yes, revisiting all of the issues that have been recurrent over the years. Jenin, yes, being a place where you have a lot of very angry, young, new generation, disaffected Palestinians, but also who are rightfully, perhaps, in their view, outraged at what they see as a disproportionate use of force, time and again by Israeli forces, against a camp in which, let's not forget, while the Israeli forces say that there are militants and, quote, terrorists dispersed among them in this camp, there are also a lot of civilians. Hence the outcry that you have time and again from human rights groups, from the international community, that this disproportionate force is extremely dangerous, all the more dangerous when it is concentrated in an area that is populated, densely populated, and interspersed with civilians.
So we're talking about an area where there's roughly around about 18,000 people living around this refugee camp. We're talking about services run by the UN. The UN saying at the moment that hospitals, one major hospital in that area, not being able to function properly throughout the last 24 hours, schools in the area as well. Tell me about the civilians. We're hearing thousands of people fleeing this.
Yeah. The estimates vary how many people are actually in the camp. There's been no formal census taken. The UN Refugee Agency says that there's about anywhere from 15,000 there. Some of the estimates are higher. They've gone up to, as high as almost 30,000, as low as about 12,000. What we do know is it is overcrowded, teeming with refugees who often have poor services or, in some cases, almost no services. The refugees right now are doing what you would do in a situation where you find yourself suddenly literally in the crossfire of raging battles between Palestinian fighters and Israeli defense forces. They're fleeing, and they are fleeing for now. Remember, the camp is within the broader Jenin city, the city in the northern tip of the occupied West Bank. They are fleeing to places to be resettled in schools, in other types of shelters within Jenin city, because Jenin is obviously a much larger city within which there's the refugee camp. But it is an uphill battle right now. There had been anticipation among those workers, social workers within the camp and the residents in recent weeks before this latest eruption of fighting that there might be violence, and there might be raging fighting to come. So they did stockpile more medicines. They did stockpile more basic necessities. But it doesn't mean they're home free, and it doesn't mean that those people who live there feel like that they are safe to stay there, which is why right now, alongside the murkiness and the chaos of the actual fight, which the Israeli Defense Forces say they hope to wrap up sooner rather than later, perhaps today or tomorrow, it's still, the uncertainty is obviously causing a lot of panic and anxiety, and refugees doing what they will do in circumstances like this, voting with their feet and getting out when the getting is good.
Doug, good context on the camp. And as Doug just said, Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator,